Hey guys, LazyMan here. Hey, as you guys can see, I use quite a bit of heat shrink here, and I wanted to come up with a way to, improve the tedious task of, cutting the heat shrink down to, smaller sizes. And normally I buy my heat shrink in lengths like this. They're about 4 foot long. And then what I do is I come down to a smaller size where I can keep them in a container like this. And then I even take those and cut them down to the smaller size, which these are 5/8 of an inch long. And I use these for when I'm single sleeving, the power supplies or other cables. So I go through quite a bit of these 5/8 long pieces of heat shrink. And that being said, normally you would cut them, using, some way of measuring them, such as, this here, and taking your X-Acto knife, and then making your cut. And that works great. And for those who probably are just going to sleeve, a couple cables or maybe even one power supply, definitely this is efficient enough and it'll get the job done. But when you have to cut a bunch of these small, in my case 5/8 of an inch long, when you have to do a bunch of them, for instance, I got 3 power supplies right now I have to single sleeve. And I'm figuring somewhere about 200 pieces for each one. So we're talking about 600 pieces. Of course, they're different colors, and that, that doesn't really matter. It's just trying to measure 5/8 and cutting and measuring and cutting and measuring and cutting. It just takes time. And what happens is you start getting sloppy and your cuts don't end up as straight or as square as you'd like. And to achieve a quality sleeve job, the heat shrink, it's not the most critical part of it, but if you want them all lined up good and they all match, you want your heat shrink all to be the same size. And I had looked into buying them pre-cut, and they do sell them. MDPC sells them, and another company that I get my heat shrink from sells them, but they charge a premium for that. And so I thought, well, there's got to be some kind of something on the market that would actually solve this issue and be able to cut these. And I had looked everywhere, and to be honest, I could not find nothing. I found those high dollar ones, machines that cost like a couple grand, and they'll cut them, but we weren't about to spend that. So what I did is I came up and figured I'd just build something myself, and this is what I came up with. So I mean, it works pretty good. It's not perfect, but it does get the job done. And what you need to do, it's pretty simple. It's adjustable this way, so I can cut anything from 4 inches long to all the way down to 1/2 inch. But that first mark there, that's my 5/8 of an inch mark, and then so on. I think that's 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inch, 2.5, so on and so forth. It also adjusts this way to allow for thicker heat shrink. This is 1/4 inch, which fits right in there. But if let's say I had to cut, some of this 3/8, then that I would adjust that to fit in there. So anyway, I wasn't going to do a video on this. I made this, I posted it on Facebook. Several people have asked for a material list and a how-to, so I figured, well, let's just make a video of it. So if this is something you're interested in, and you may end up cutting a bunch of heat shrink, and you want to make something like that, by all means, continue watching. If not, go on to the next video, because you're going to find this quite boring. So anyway, here we'll just cut a couple pieces and I'll show you how this works. So what I've done is I got this set for, I'm cutting this at 2 1/4 inches, I believe. I forgot my tape measure. There we go. So I've got that set, I'm sorry, 2.5 inches. And that allows me to cut 5/8 of an inch 4 times, right? So what I can do is, I just set it in there, and what I've done is I've got this set so I can run the blade along the side of that and along the side of this side here. And I'll show you more of this when we start looking at what it took to make this. And then you guys will understand. But you know, you just run your knife through like that and it cuts it. It's nice and straight. I don't know if you guys can see that right there. So it came out pretty nice. And we'll just cut a couple more. I mean, so that's how those are done, and they come out perfect. Now if we wanted to say cut some 5/8 of an inch, which is what I'll end up doing for single sleeving, is I just set that to 5/8, tighten up the thumb screws there, set that in there, and then you're gonna have to use a little bit of your own, you know, it's not automated. So, but it does give you a nice straight even cut every time. I don't have to measure it. I just cut it and then, you know, push it to the side, and that one's perfect there. So that'll give me those 4 there. So it just makes it quicker. I mean, if I did it here on the ruler here, you know, I'd have to measure that, and then I'd have to cut, measure another one and cut. So I just found this to be more efficient. So let me go ahead and tear this apart. We'll go over exactly some of the measurements I have and how I built this. Now, this is just a prototype. These measurements aren't etched in stone, so you guys can improvise and do whatever you feel you need to do to make it more efficient for yourself. But anyway, let me go ahead and tear it apart, and I'll get back with you. All right, guys, I went ahead and got it all taken apart, and the material I use and the measurements I'm going to give you, you know, are just a roundabout, because you're going to be able to use whatever you really, you know, get your hands on. The first thing I started with was this piece of aluminum. It is raised. It's a piece of channel. It's about 7 inches by 6 inches. It's about 6 inches that way, 7 inches this way. So you're probably not going to be able to find any of this. But if you do, this is what you want. You want something raised, because when you put your sliders on, you know, your nuts or your bolts are going to be under here, or your screws. So you need something up off the surface. What I suggest is, you know, if you just can find a piece of plate like this, just cut yourself some strips and then screw those onto the bottom to give it, you know, to raise it up off the surface. So, I mean, that would work. So this is kind of like the piece I started with. Again, where I got this stuff, a little secret, if you guys check your local fab shop or metal shop, you know, a lot of times they throw away, you know, what they consider scrap metals. And, you know, I've found a lot of, you know, perforated steel, aluminums, you know, thin metal, sheet metal, you know, all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, that's where you want to try to see if you can find some of this. If not, you know, you're going to have to purchase some if you want to make this. Home Depot's not going to carry this. So you'd either have to buy it online or go to purchase it from a metal shop. But again, check with the foreman there, and he might tell you where the scrap is, or they may just have a dumpster, you know, where you can rifle through. So anyway, again, you want to start off with the piece. Again, mine is 7 inches long, 6 inches wide. And so what I did is I laid it out, and again, the distance for this is whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be whatever I got it. And I got the spacing 3 1/4 inches, and this piece 4 inches long. You know, keep in mind that probably the biggest tube or heat shrink you're going to cut is 3/8, maybe 1/2 inch, hell, even 1 inch. And even if you had to cut 1 inch heat shrink, you don't need all this space. But I wanted something a little more substantial that had a little bit of weight, so, you know, it kind of was self-efficient, where, you know, just sat there and I didn't have to kind of, you know what I mean. So anyway, so the first thing we want to do is cut these slots and measure them out. Figure out how long you're going to want to cut your heat shrink, and the longest I'm ever going to need to cut something. I thought originally I was going to cut these 4 inches long, because I went off of what was in here, and I thought, okay, well, we'll cut them down to 4 inch, and then we can cut them down to 5/8. But 5/8 didn't go to 4 inch evenly enough, and then because of this container that I purchased, I could have gone 4 inches, but then it would leave me. I wanted to get as much as I can in here. And by splitting this in half and still leaving enough room for the smaller ones, I was able to go 2 1/2 and 2 1/2. So that's how I came up with my measurements. So go ahead and you want it 4 inches where you're going to make your cut. So what you first need to do is determine where your cut's going to be. And then measure your 4 inches and make sure you're going to have enough material, right? So I decided that, you know, somewhere in this area is where I'd be making my cut. So I measured 4 inches and figured, okay, well, you know, that's going to be perfect. You know, it gives me a little extra material there for this thing. So when I set this thing, you know, it has something to bolt down on. You know, if you cut it at 4 inches, well, then you're not going to have nowhere for this to go. So you got to go beyond 4 inches. So you know, about 4.5. Here I went almost 4 3/4. So once you figure out where that is going to be, you mark this. You're just going to want to lay it out. And I didn't draw up on this one the layout marks. But you can kind of figure where you're going to put your marks. And what I started with was the 2 rails here. Got those laid out. And the way I cut these rails or these slots is, and you can do it with a Dremel or whatever you have, but I just took my Metabo, I don't know if you can see that right there, I've got 2 blades on there. And what I originally did is cut the slot with 1 blade. Then I added the other blade and then made the final cut. And you could probably put both blades on at the same time. But keep in mind when you add 2 blades to anything, whether it be your Dremel or your other rotary tool, or you know, something like a Metabo here that's got a lot of torque on it, just use caution, because they're not designed to have 2 blades on there. But so that's how I was able to cut those slots. Then what I did is, and I wish I didn't have this rubber on here so I could show you, but then I had to figure out where I needed these slots. And again, the distance between these 2 slots isn't that critical. In my case, I think I have the space, so about 1 1/4 inches, and the pieces I cut are 2 1/4, and these are about 1 1/8 wide by 2 1/4 long. And you see this one, there's a shorter one and a longer one, and I'll explain why in a minute. The shorter one is going to go on this side where you're pulling the knife to you. So the longer one is going to be your adjustment here. All right. So what I did was, again, cut these rails. So I know that this is going to go here, and I mounted it with my hardware and made sure it was going to work. Because what you're going to have to do, and guys, before we go any further, I'm jumping around because I didn't plan this video, and I'm just trying to do it on the fly, and that's it. So just try to bear with me. So anyway, what I used were these here, and these are just hold downs for a CPU or CPU bracket. So it's just a screw, you know, with a thumbnail in there. You know, I added the 2 washers, the lock washer and the flat washer. So anyway, you know, I got that on there, and we'll put this together as we go, I guess. So, oh. Another thing what I did is, because this angle iron here, this is just 1/2 inch angle. You can get this at Home Depot. But what I did is, because you can see with this thumb screw here, I wanted to have easy access to this thumb screw. I don't know if you guys can see. So with it being down below the angle iron there, I just felt it was going to be a little more tedious to get to. It is. So what I did is I cut some spacers to raise that up above the angle iron. So put that there. This is just a 1/4 inch tube, stainless steel tube. Again, you can get this at Home Depot. So put that on there. Then my thumb screw. What I noticed is with the flat washer and the lock washer on the bottom, that's going to allow you, once you got this together, it's going to allow you to tighten the thumb screw without having to, you know, put your fingers on the bottom and hold that. Okay, let's get our spacer on there. Alright, so once those are semi-tight, you know, and then you loosen them up to just where you can move this wherever you need. So if I had to go there, I can just tighten this without touching the bottom, you know, without putting my hand on the bottom. See? So that works pretty good. So what you want to do is whatever screw you use, of course you're going to have to make sure it slides up and down that slot comfortably. And, you know, after I cut it with the grinder, then, you know, you just take a file, you know, and clean it up. Pretty simple. Alright, so then anyway, let's get on with this. Over here, again, I cut two of these. One is a little bit longer than the other. The longer one is the adjustment. And again, we'll put that together. Same way. Alright, so that's on there. Then we needed to mount the other piece, and what this does is this keeps the heat shrink, you know, see, I mean, if you don't have that, I mean, you can just probably use this one here, but I wanted something that was going to hold the heat shrink, you know, like that. So after I got those two slots figured out, this could have gone really anywhere. I mean, I could have done this right here, you know. So I just picked a spot and I mounted it. So in this case what I did is I just tapped the bottom and used these screws here. I didn't need thumb screws because this one here is going to be stationary and you're never going to need to move it again. Well, let's get that mounted. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to make sure the stuff is going on square. So my screws, my holes, because they're tapped, you know, are exactly square, so I know that those are going to be good. Okay, so now that gives me my adjustment here. It gives me this here. What I learned, now this is what's critical. Originally I had both of these cut at the same size. And if you look at the Facebook picture that I put up, I didn't have this little piece here, which this piece is 3/8 by 1 1/8. So I didn't have this little piece here, which, you know, will end up going there. I just had this, and what I noticed as I'm cutting my heat shrink, I'm going to try to demo this right here for you. When I cut this, another key thing you want to use, make sure you use a knife with a sharp blade. And I was using X-Acto knives, but I found that they didn't work as well as just a regular box cutter, you know, utility knife. The blades you can get them real cheap. I like to use these for something a little bit finer, and I didn't want to ruin all my blades. But I found this works the best. But even without this little piece here, when I would cut that, and it may not happen this time, but we'll see. When I cut that, see, it didn't work. It didn't happen that time. But what I noticed is when I cut that, it would drag this over. I don't know if we can see this. It would drag this over, and the very end, I would get an uneven cut. This one turned out pretty good, but it would leave an uneven cut there, and so I thought, well, I needed something to hold that. You can see when I put that there, that can't go nowhere. So when I make my cut, it won't. At least at the cut end, it won't bend at the cut. All right, so then what I did with this, another thing I was concerned about is I didn't want screws sticking up in the way of my knife. Okay, these are further back, so that it didn't come into contact with that. But as I tried this originally, if I had something up like this, you know, sticking up, it was in my way. So what I did is I went ahead and took the little piece, got my two holes, and I tapped those, and I screwed these from the bottom, and I tried to make sure that the screw was flush with the top, or, you know, less than flush with the top. And matter of fact, I don't know if you can see that, but it's sticking a little bit above the face of that. Not a big deal, but what I did is I took a washer added a washer, and that took up the extra. Alright guys, I went ahead and got that on. A couple things I want to make note of is when you make this little piece here, you want this surface here, or this edge here, to be at the same plane as this edge here. And you want it both to be square to each other. So what I did is I took just a regular blade, and then I was able to lay that in there until I was able to get it square, and then I was able to mark my holes. So because what you want is when you pull your knife through, as you're cutting your heat shrink, you want the blade to right up against this side here. That's going to get you started with a nice square straight cut, and then to catch this other side here, so you stay square and straight. So the other thing that is worth noting is originally I had both of these at the same length, and I noticed as I was cutting my heat shrink that when it came across here with them being on the same length, it would not only would pull because I didn't have this piece, but it was also because this piece was the same length as this. It didn't have no relief. So I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me see if we can see it like that. So you can see the gap. I got it up against this surface here, and then the surface of the little piece, and then see the gap between the blade and here. Alright. Okay, so once I've got it all laid out, figure out it's going to work, then I went ahead and put this piece of rubber down. And all this is neoprene rubber. You can get it at Amazon. It's like $8 for 12 by 12 square. I cut that. I cut out for the slots. I used a hole punch. For the screw holes, you can use whatever you want, but I just used a regular, hole punch. You can get that at any hobby shop. And then what I did was I measured off of my surface here. This is your cutting surface, not the shorter piece here. So I measured off that, got my marks on here, and then I just took a scribe like this, and I just scribed my marks. And then I took a black felt pen and filled in the scribe marks so I could see these here. So that's pretty much it. Pretty simple. So anyway, I know this video is dragging on. Let me just tell you what I would do if I had to change this, or when I do another prototype. The first thing I'd like to do, instead of having to cut this manually like this, put something on an arm that would come down with a blade. And whether it be a rotary blade or even one of these, these blades, have that on some kind of arm that came down and kind of chopped the heat shrink. The other would be, as you can see with the rubber, you can see the cut marks. It's cutting through the rubber. I think you can see it there. So what I would do is I would take a piece of this, and this would work perfect. And what I would do is I would cut this, hopefully we can see this, I'd cut this so the scale mark right here is in sync with my marks here. So then I would know exactly where I needed to measure to or put my stop. So those are the two changes I would make. This thing works efficient enough for me, so I don't doubt I'm going to spend hours trying to revise it. So I think I'm just going to go with this. All right, guys. So thanks for watching this video, and I got some good modding videos coming up, and I got another build on the horizon here, so we're going to be taking a look at that here in the near future. Again, you guys go ahead and come over to my WestCoastMods Facebook group account or page. A lot of good activity over there. So I'd like to see you guys over there. And definitely, if you haven't yet, subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel, and definitely like this video. All right, it helps me out. All right, guys. Until next time, this is LazyMan.